The penthouse suite on the 42nd floor gleamed with cold perfection. Glass and steel reflected the Seoul skyline, a testament to Minji Park's success as CEO of Hanul Technologies. Every surface was pristine, every corner designed by award-winning architects. Yet tonight, as she returned from another late board meeting, the emptiness echoed louder than usual. Her heels clicked against marble floors as she made her way through the silent apartment. The housekeeper had left hours ago. The chef had prepared tomorrow's meals and departed. Only one person remained: Ji-won, the young woman she'd hired 3 months ago to care for her daughter, Seo-yun. Minji loosened her Chanel blazer and walked towards Seo-yun's room, expecting to find Ji-won reading in the adjacent Nanny's quarters. The room was empty. Frowning, she checked the kitchen, the living room, even the library. Nothing. A thread of worry tightened in her chest. Where could the girl be at this hour? She moved through the apartment with growing concern, her mind racing through possibilities, none of them good. When she heard a faint sound from the service corridor, she followed it to the laundry room, a space she rarely entered herself. The door stood slightly ajar. Minji pushed it open gently and froze. There, curled on a thin blanket beside the washing machines, lay Ji-won. The young woman was fast asleep, her worn jacket pulled tight around her shoulders, her face pressed against a folded towel serving as a makeshift pillow. In the harsh fluorescent light, Minji could see the exhaustion etched into Ji-won's features, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her thin frame seemed almost childlike in sleep. Something shifted inside Minji's chest, an unexpected ache. Minji stood in the doorway for a long moment, her hand still on the door handle. Her first instinct was anger, confusion. Why would Ji-won sleep here when she had a perfectly good room? Had something happened? Was this some kind of protest? But as she studied the sleeping girl, those thoughts dissolved. This wasn't rebellion. This was desperation. The blanket Ji-won lay on was threadbare, clearly something the girl had brought from home rather than taken from the apartment's linen closet. A small backpack rested near her head, and Minji could see the corner of what looked like instant noodle packages peeking out. The realization hit her like cold water. Ji-won wasn't just sleeping here by choice. She was living here. Minji's mind raced back through the past 3 months. She'd been so focused on work, on the merger, on proving herself in a male-dominated industry. She'd hired Ji-won through an agency, reviewed her credentials, signed the contracts. But had she ever really looked at the girl? Really seen her? Ji-won was always punctual, always professional, always had a soft smile for Seo-yun. Minji had never asked where she went on her days off, never inquired about her life outside these walls. She thought of her own journey. 20 years ago, she'd been not so different from Ji-won, a scholarship student from a small town, sleeping in university libraries because her tiny dormitory room was unbearable. She'd clawed her way up through sheer will and endless work, and somewhere along that climb, she'd forgotten what it felt like to be powerless. Now, looking at Ji-won's sleeping form, the memories came flooding back, sharp and painful and undeniable. Minji retreated from the laundry room as quietly as she'd entered. She couldn't wake Ji-won, not yet. She needed to understand the situation first. In her home office, she pulled up the employment file, reading it properly for the first time. Ji-won Song, 23 years old, orphaned at 16, raised in a group home, no permanent address listed, only a post office box, references from 3 families, all glowing. Education stopped at high school. The pieces fell into place with brutal clarity. Ji-won had no home to go to on her days off. The address she'd listed for payroll was fictitious, probably just a place to receive mail. She was essentially homeless, surviving on the kindness of the families who employed her, moving from position to position with everything she owned in that small backpack. Minji felt a wave of shame wash over her. She thought about the salary she paid Ji-won. It was market rate, fair by industry standards. But in Seoul, where rent consumed half of most people's income, where a small studio cost more than many made in a month, that salary was barely enough to survive, let alone save. No wonder Ji-won slept in laundry rooms. She probably couldn't afford anything else. Minji sat back in her leather chair, staring at the contract she'd signed without a second thought. The irony wasn't lost on her. She made business decisions worth billions, negotiated with global corporations, commanded respect in boardrooms across Asia. Yet she'd never noticed the suffering of the young woman living under her own roof, caring for her most precious treasure. The thought made her sick. She'd become everything she'd once despised, blind, privileged, disconnected. But she could change that. She would change that. Starting tonight. The next morning, Minji woke before dawn. She'd barely slept, her mind churning with plans. She dressed in casual clothes rather than her usual business attire and made her way to the kitchen. This was normally the chef's domain, but today she dismissed him with a text, wanting privacy for what was to come. She prepared a simple breakfast, something she rarely did anymore, and set 2 places at the small breakfast table. When Ji-won emerged from the hallway at 6:30, already dressed and ready for the day, she froze at the sight of Minji. The CEO saw confusion flash across the young woman's face, followed quickly by fear. Ji-won's eyes darted to the laundry room corridor, as if calculating whether Minji had discovered her secret. The guilt in her expression answered Minji's unspoken question. "Good morning, Ji-won," Minji said, her voice gentler than usual. "Please, sit down. I've made breakfast." Ji-won approached slowly, like a deer ready to bolt. She sat on the edge of the chair, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze fixed on the table. The posture broke Minji's heart. This was what fear looked like. Fear of losing a job, fear of losing a place to sleep, fear of losing everything. "You don't have to be afraid," Minji said softly. "I'm not angry. I want to understand." She poured tea for both of them, the simple act feeling strangely intimate. "I found you in the laundry room last night. You were sleeping there. How long has this been going on?" Ji-won's face crumpled, and tears began to stream down her cheeks. The dam had broken, and there was no holding back the flood. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. Please don't fire me. I'll find somewhere else. I just needed a few more weeks to save enough for a deposit." Minji reached across the table and gently took Ji-won's hand. The gesture surprised them both. "Listen to me," she said firmly. "You're not being fired. I need you to tell me everything. Start from the beginning." Between tears and halting words, the story emerged. Ji-won had aged out of the group home system at 18 with nothing but her clothes and a small grant for education. She'd tried to attend university while working part-time, but the costs were impossible. She'd dropped out after 1 semester. She'd found work as a nanny, moving from family to family. Some let her stay during her employment, others didn't. Between jobs, she'd slept in jjilbangs, 24-hour bathhouses where people paid a small fee to shower and rest. Sometimes she'd stayed with friends, sleeping on their floors until she wore out her welcome. She'd been saving every one she could, but Seoul's rental market was brutal. Even the smallest Gosiwon room required several months' deposit plus key money. "When you hired me, the contract said live-in," Ji-won explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I'd have my own room. But on my first day, you showed me the nanny's quarters and said I could use it during my shifts if Seo-yun needed me at night. I didn't want to assume I could stay there all the time. And you never said I could, so at first I left after my shifts ended. I tried staying at the bathhouse, but I was spending all my earnings just to have a place to sleep. Then I realized you never went to the laundry room. So I started sleeping there on my days off, just somewhere safe and warm." Minji felt shame burn through her. The misunderstanding was entirely her fault. She'd been so accustomed to staff coming and going, so focused on her own schedule, that she'd never clarified the living arrangement. She'd assumed Ji-won understood the position was fully residential. Instead, she'd created a situation where a young woman felt she had to hide in the laundry room just to have shelter. The realization was devastating. This wasn't just a communication failure, it was a moral one. "You've been living like this for 3 months?" Minji asked, her voice tight with emotion. Ji-won nodded miserably. "And you never said anything?" "I didn't want to seem ungrateful," Ji-won whispered. "You pay me well. You treat me kindly. Seo-yun is wonderful. I was afraid if I asked for more, you'd think I was taking advantage. There are so many people who want these positions. I thought if I just worked hard enough, saved enough, I could eventually get my own place and everything would be fine." Minji stood abruptly, overwhelmed by a mix of anger at herself and determination to fix this. "Come with me," she said. She led Ji-won through the apartment to the nanny's quarters, a spacious room with an attached bathroom, a comfortable bed, and large windows overlooking the city. The room had been designed for exactly this purpose, but she'd never made it clear. "This is your room," Minji said firmly. "Not just during shifts, always. This is your home for as long as you work here." Ji-won stared at her, disbelief written across her face. "I don't understand," she managed. "When I said live-in position, I meant you live here full-time," Minji explained, her voice softer now. "This is your room, your space. You should never have felt you had to sleep anywhere else. I failed to make that clear, and I'm deeply sorry. The fault is entirely mine." She opened the closet, which was empty. "We'll get you proper furniture today, whatever you need." Ji-won's legs seemed to give out. She sank onto the bed, tears flowing freely now. But these were different tears: relief, hope, disbelief. Minji sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance, but staying close enough to offer comfort. "I should have noticed sooner," she said quietly. "I've been so caught up in work, in my own world, that I stopped seeing the people around me. You've been taking care of my daughter with such love and dedication while struggling just to survive. That ends today. You have a home here now." Over the following weeks, Minji made good on her promise. She took Ji-won shopping, insisting she pick out clothes, personal items, everything she needed to make the room truly hers. At first, Ji-won was hesitant, choosing only the most inexpensive items, but Minji gently pushed her to select things she actually wanted, not just what she thought she could accept. It became a careful dance of rebuilding trust and dignity. Minji also revised Ji-won's contract, increasing her salary significantly and adding benefits she'd overlooked before: health insurance, paid vacation, a retirement contribution. When she presented the new contract, Ji-won had cried again, overwhelmed by the sudden security. "You don't have to do all this," she'd whispered. "Yes, I do," Minji had replied firmly. "You deserve far more than the minimum. You care for the most important person in my life." But the changes went deeper than material comfort. Minji found herself coming home earlier, spending more time with Seo-yun and, by extension, with Ji-won. She began to see the young woman not just as an employee, but as a person with dreams, fears, and talents. Ji-won had a gift for drawing, something she'd never had the opportunity to develop. She loved literature and would read to Seo-yun for hours with such expression that even Minji found herself pausing to listen. One evening, Minji found Ji-won in the library, reading a business textbook she'd borrowed from Minji's shelf. "Are you interested in business?" Minji asked. Ji-won looked up, startled, then nodded shyly. "I always wanted to study it. I had to drop out of university, but I still try to learn on my own." Minji made a decision in that moment. "Would you like to go back to school?" she asked. "We could arrange your schedule around classes. I'll cover your tuition." Ji-won's eyes widened in shock and hope. "You would do that for me?" The decision to sponsor Ji-won's education opened new dimensions in their relationship. Minji helped her apply to Seoul National University's evening program in business administration. When the acceptance letter arrived, they celebrated together, and Minji felt a surge of pride that surprised her in its intensity. She'd mentored young professionals before, but this felt different. This felt personal. As Ji-won began her classes, Minji found herself taking a more active interest in the young woman's studies. They'd discuss case studies over dinner, debate business strategies, while Seo-yun played nearby. Ji-won had a sharp mind and fresh perspectives that challenged Minji's sometimes cynical views. The CEO realized she'd been so focused on surviving in the corporate world that she'd lost sight of why she'd entered it in the first place, to build something meaningful. Seo-yun, too, bloomed under the new arrangement. With both Minji and Ji-won more present and engaged, the little girl's personality emerged. She was bright, curious, and affectionate. Minji began to understand what she'd been missing by working such long hours. Yes, she was providing financial security, but Seo-yun needed more than money. She needed presence, she needed love, she needed her mother. One Saturday afternoon, the three of them were in the park, an outing that would have been impossible in Minji's previous schedule. Seo-yun ran ahead, chasing pigeons, while Minji and Ji-won walked behind. "Thank you," Ji-won said suddenly, "for everything. You changed my life." Minji shook her head. "You changed mine," she replied honestly. "I was so lost in ambition that I'd forgotten what matters. You reminded me, you and Seo-yun both." They walked in comfortable silence, a bond forming between them that transcended employer and employee, that felt almost like family. The transformation in Minji's penthouse was noticed by others. Her assistant remarked on her improved mood. Board members commented on her more balanced perspective in meetings. Even her ex-husband, Seo-yun's father, noticed the change when he came for his monthly visit. "You seem different," he observed. "Happier." Minji smiled. "I am," she said simply, not elaborating. Some things were too personal to explain, but not everyone approved of the evolving dynamic. Minji's mother, a formidable businesswoman herself, visited and was horrified to find Minji and Ji-won studying together at the dining table, Seo-yun coloring beside them. "You're too familiar with the help," she scolded after Ji-won excused herself. "You're paying for her education, setting a dangerous precedent." Minji met her mother's gaze steadily. "Ji-won isn't the help. She's family, and I won't hear otherwise." The confrontation with her mother forced Minji to articulate what had been growing in her heart. She cared about Ji-won deeply, not just as an employee or even as a protégé, but as someone she genuinely loved and wanted to see succeed. The realization was both liberating and terrifying. She'd built so many walls around her heart after her divorce, focused so intensely on her career that she'd forgotten how to let people in. Ji-won had somehow scaled those walls without even trying. That night, unable to sleep, Minji found herself in the kitchen making tea. Ji-won appeared in the doorway, also restless. "Can't sleep?" Minji asked. Ji-won shook her head. They sat together in the dimly lit kitchen, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows. "My mother thinks I'm making a mistake," Minji said quietly. "Being too close to you, too generous." Ji-won's face fell. "Maybe she's right," she whispered. "Maybe I should find another position." "No," Minji said firmly, surprised by the panic that flared in her chest. "You're not going anywhere. You belong here." The months passed in a rhythm that felt increasingly natural. Ji-won excelled in her studies, often staying up late to complete assignments after Seo-yun was asleep. Minji would find her at the dining table, surrounded by books and papers, and would sit beside her, offering advice or simply keeping her company. These quiet evenings became the highlight of Minji's days, more valuable than any business triumph. One night, as they worked through a particularly challenging case study, Ji-won looked up from her laptop. "Can I ask you something personal?" she ventured. Minji nodded. "Why did you really help me? It wasn't just guilt, was it?" Minji was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer carefully. "At first, yes, it was guilt," she admitted. "But then I got to know you. I saw your strength, your resilience, your kindness. I saw someone who deserved a chance but never got one, and I realized I had the power to change that. But it's more than that now," Minji continued, her voice softer. "You make me want to be better. You remind me of who I was before I became so hardened by this world. You've brought light back into this apartment, into my life, into Seo Yun's life. I should be thanking you." Ji-won's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You gave me a home," she said simply. "No one's ever done that before, not really." The vulnerability in that moment hung between them, fragile and precious. Minji realized they'd crossed some invisible line, moved from employer and employee to something far deeper. She thought about her mother's warnings, about the complications this could create, but she couldn't bring herself to care. Some connections were worth any complication. Some people were worth taking risks for. Ji-won was one of them. This realization filled Minji with both joy and fear, a potent combination that kept her awake long into the night. As winter approached, Ji-won completed her first semester with top marks. Minji threw a small celebration dinner, just the three of them, and presented Ji-won with a gift, a laptop of her own, since she'd been borrowing Minji's old one. Ji-won protested that it was too much, but Minji insisted. "Every student needs proper tools," she said firmly. "Besides, I want you to succeed. Your success matters to me." The words carried weight beyond their surface meaning. But success came with complications. Other families began asking Minji about her miracle nanny, who was studying business while working. Some made offers to Ji-won, promising higher salaries, easier schedules. Minji felt a possessive panic she didn't want to examine too closely. When Ji-won mentioned one particularly generous offer over dinner, Minji had to force herself to respond calmly. "It's your decision," she managed, "but I hope you'll stay. We need you. Seo Yun needs you." "I need you," she didn't say aloud. "I'm not going anywhere," Ji-won assured her, reaching across the table to squeeze Minji's hand. "This is my home. You're my family. I don't want to be anywhere else." The relief that flooded through Minji was disproportionate to the situation, and she knew it. She was becoming too attached, too invested in Ji-won's presence, but she couldn't help it. The apartment felt empty when Ji-won was at class. Dinner felt incomplete without their discussions. Even her work felt less fulfilling without Ji-won to share it with. That evening, after Seo Yun was asleep, they found themselves on the balcony, looking out over Seoul's glittering night skyline. "Do you ever think about the future?" Minji asked. "Where you'll be in 5 years?" Ji-won smiled. "I used to think about just surviving the next day. Now I can think about years. It's because of you." She paused. "I want to finish my degree, maybe work in business. But more than that, I want to make you proud. I want to deserve everything you've given me." "You already do," Minji said softly. "More than you know." The turning point came unexpectedly. Minji had a major presentation for the board, one that would determine the future direction of her company. She'd been preparing for weeks, but the night before, she fell ill with a severe flu. She tried to push through, but by morning she was feverish and weak. The presentation was critical. Postponing it would cost the company millions and undermine her position as CEO. Ji-won found her in her office at dawn, struggling to review her notes through the fever haze. "You can't do this," Ji-won said firmly. "You need to rest." "I have no choice," Minji replied, her voice hoarse. "Too much is riding on this." Ji-won was quiet for a moment, then said something that surprised them both. "Let me help you. I've watched you prepare. I know this presentation inside and out. I can be your voice if you write down exactly what to emphasize." Min-ji stared at her, fever-addled brain struggling to process the suggestion. Let Ji-won present to her board. It was unconventional, possibly career-ending if it went wrong. But as she looked at the young woman, saw the determination and confidence in her eyes, she realized she trusted Ji-won completely. "You'd do that for me?" she asked. "I'd do anything for you," Ji-won replied simply. The words hung in the air, meaning more than either was ready to acknowledge. For the next few hours, despite her fever, Min-ji coached Ji-won through every nuance of the presentation. Ji-won absorbed it all like a sponge, asking intelligent questions, making suggestions that actually improved the pitch. By the time they were done, Min-ji's doubts had evaporated. Ji-won could do this. More than that, she would excel at it. As Ji-won left for the board meeting, dressed in one of Min-ji's suits, Min-ji whispered, "Thank you for everything." Ji-won smiled back. "We're family. That's what family does." Ji-won delivered the presentation flawlessly. She answered the board's questions with poise and intelligence, defending Min-ji's strategy with passion and precision. When she returned to the apartment that evening, Min-ji was waiting anxiously despite her fever. "They approved it," Ji-won announced, her face glowing. "All of it. They were impressed." Then she added shyly, "They asked who I was. I told them I was studying business and working as your assistant. Several gave me their cards, said to contact them when I graduate." Min-ji felt pride swell in her chest so intensely it almost hurt. "You were brilliant," she said. "You saved everything." "No," Ji-won replied softly. "You saved me first. This was just returning the favor." She sat beside Min-ji's bed, checking her temperature with a gentle hand. "You need to rest now. Let me take care of you for once." The role reversal was strangely comforting. For so long, Min-ji had been the strong one, the provider, the protector. It felt good to let someone else shoulder that burden. Over the next few days, as Min-ji recovered, Ji-won managed everything: Seo-yun's care, the household, even fielding Min-ji's business calls with surprising competence. When Min-ji was finally well enough to return to work, she found that her assistant had been fielding questions about the impressive young woman who'd presented to the board. The corporate world had noticed Ji-won, and Min-ji knew that soon she'd have to confront an uncomfortable truth. Ji-won had outgrown the nanny position. That evening, they had the conversation Min-ji had been dreading. "You're ready for more," Min-ji said. "The board members who gave you their cards weren't just being polite. They saw your potential. You could have a career in business." Ji-won looked troubled. "But what about Seo-yun? What about here?" Min-ji took a deep breath. "I have a proposal. Finish your degree. Then come work for my company officially, not as a nanny, but in our business development department. You can live here as long as you want. This will always be your home. But it's time you had a real career." 2 years later, Ji-won graduated at the top of her class. Min-ji attended the ceremony with Seo-yun, both of them cheering loudly when Ji-won's name was called. As promised, Ji-won joined Hanul Technologies' business development team. She proved herself quickly, bringing fresh perspectives and genuine care for the company's mission. Colleagues gravitated to her natural leadership. Within months, she was managing her own projects. But more importantly, the bond between Min-ji and Ji-won deepened into something unshakable. They were no longer employer and employee, mentor and student, not even just friends. They were family in the truest sense, chosen and cherished. Seo-yun now called Ji-won Unnie, big sister, and the title fit perfectly. The three of them had become their own little unit, supporting and loving each other through all of life's challenges. Minji often thought back to that night when she'd found Ji-won sleeping in the laundry room. What if she'd reacted with anger instead of compassion? What if she'd fired the girl and never looked back? She would have lost so much. A daughter who was happier and more secure, a home that felt warm instead of empty, and a relationship that had transformed her understanding of success. She'd learned that wealth wasn't measured in stock prices or board positions, but in the people you loved and who loved you back. One evening, as they sat together on that same balcony where they'd had so many important conversations, Ji-won said quietly, "You know, I used to dream about having a home, a real home. I never imagined I'd find a family too." Minji squeezed her hand. "I never imagined I needed one until you showed me what I was missing." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights, three lives that had intersected by chance and transformed by choice. The CEO and the girl she'd found sleeping in her laundry room, now bound together by something far stronger than circumstance. They were family, forged not by blood, but by compassion, built not on obligation, but on love. And that made all the difference.